Welcome to Success Matters. My guest today is Manu Juneja, whose journey from the black and white world of law to the vibrant world of the Bombay fashion industry made her feel that there was an emptiness in life. Manu is a mindfulness practitioner and meditation enthusiast who found clarity and understanding in the simple act of writing down her thoughts and meticulously discovering the subtle patterns woven within the labyrinth of them. Unraveling the hidden meaning, she offers us a glimpse into the profound impact of self-awareness and the beauty of embracing the present moment. Manu was first introduced to the world of meditation while studying for her MBA, where paradoxically, the curriculum required her to attend a mandatory meditation course. Highly skeptical about it, she recalls telling her parents that it was for old people only. But when the COVID pandemic hit, it was the practice of meditation and mindfulness that helped her through. Mindfulness and journaling helped Manu to look inside herself, stop second-guessing and overanalyzing, and begin to focus on filling her inner cup first before trying to fill the cup of others. Join us as Manu shares practical tips on how to cultivate mindfulness in our daily lives and harness the power of introspection to navigate life's challenges with grace and clarity. So, Manu, thank you very much for joining me on Success Matters podcast. I connected with you really through LinkedIn, through a mutual friend, Adele. And what drew me to your profile was the fact that you have done a TED Talk. And I don't know many people who have done TED Talks. So I thought I'd love to speak to you about the experience and what it was that led to you doing this TED Talk.
Yes. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I have to say before we jump into that answer, I love Adele. She's been amazing to me. We both worked together in the same company a few years ago. And there was a point in time in my life where I took a sabbatical moved from one job to and didn't know what I wanted to do next. And she was a brilliant coach for me. So it's great that we connected through her. The TED Talk, so it's actually a TEDx talk, not a TED Talk. Just to clarify, I think they have different branding. The TED Talk is that big stage, and the TEDx is, done differently, like in several different places. It was something that was being run by my company that I work in currently, and they asked, people to, obviously, raise their hand and nominate themselves. I did that because at the time, I had just come out of the sabbatical. I had started to practice, what people now popularly call mindfulness in the Western world. Right. And just through those days when I was taking a break and doing this practice, I had this, I feel like a big insight or aha moment for myself that I felt like I should share with the world. So I talked a little bit about how I have started to think about living from the inside out rather than the outside in as a concept, and using mindfulness as a way to serve yourself before you serve others and give your energy and attention to yourself. That's how it was. So it was in 2021, November, when I did my talk.
And so living your life inside out, what does that mean?
Okay. It means a lot of things. So, for me, my journey to meditation and mindfulness started back in 2003. I was doing my MBA program in Pune, in India. And paradoxically, so it came to me as a mandatory learning course in our MBA program. So we were sent to do this 10-day Vipassana retreat, if you will, in Igatpuri, Pune. Honestly, at that point in time in my life, meditation didn't have a lot of relevance. I was young, I was in college, I had too many other things that I was, interested in and cared about. But I was forced to sit in this 10-day silent retreat that required you to just focus on your breath, day in and day out. Now, I remember coming out of that 10-day retreat, going home and telling my parents that, everyone who retires should go and do meditation, right? Like, it's for the old people. Well, little did I know that, as life went on and as I made choices, sometimes bad choices, that I was just nudged towards this practice of going within and thinking about, why this is happening to me, why am I doing things this way, so on and so forth. And over time, I just had many different opportunities to go to practice meditation in many different ways. So And there were many situations in life where I was just pushed towards it. So, for example, having a bad boss or not having a good working situation, or, even having troubles in my relationship, and so on and so forth. And I also moved from India to the US. So that move in itself was quite challenging. And as I continued to do that, I realized that, a lot of times, like, our mind operates like that. Have you seen a Chinese finger trap? It's a little toy, it's like a tube, and it has like a,
Right.
beam structure to it. But I got introduced to it through my kids at the dollar store. And, we
Okay.
bought, a huge number of those. But essentially, it's a toy that kids can play with, and you can put your it has holes on both sides, like a tube, as I said. You put your fingers in, and the first thing that comes to mind as your fingers get stuck in the tube, because it's pretty narrow, is you want to pull out of it, right? So your normal default reaction is you are wanting to, like, pull out. And I think that's the way that at least my brain, and I think a lot of human brains operate, in that you try to externalize. You try to say, oh, this problem is happening to me, and who is behind this problem? Why is this happening to me? And so on and so forth. So there's a lot of externalization to, something is happening to me, or something is being done to me. And at least that's how I saw all these situations. However, just like in the Chinese finger trap, the only way to get out of the trap is you have to actually counterintuitively go in. So you have to actually
Right.
push your fingers in so that they can be a release, and it forces the trap to, like, release a little bit, make it a little bigger, and then it's easier for you to get out of it, if that makes any sense. This entire idea of going in to let go of your worries or tensions is where I gravitated towards, when I was practicing mindfulness, and realized that I had the same old thought pattern, no matter what problem was being thrown at me or what things I was looking at. And it was all being driven by my thoughts. Now, not to say that, of course, there are situations in life that happen to you, you are, something happens that may be externalized, but the way you react to those situations is something that, is in your control. So, especially in 2020, when COVID happened to all of us, I started to meditate a lot more, and brought this practice of mindfulness to really just ground myself in the days where I felt overwhelmed, as a mom of 2 elementary school children, as someone who was working, full time at the time, obviously remotely, and just felt like there was so much tension and worries in the house for the health of our family members, or schooling of our children, and toilet paper, not having toilet paper in the house, in those days, everything seemed to be a big worry. And I started journaling at that time, and realized, through my journaling. So I would sit down to meditate. And, obviously it's a difficult practice and a process when you meditate, because your mind keeps wavering, right? And the entire idea is you bring your attention back to breath, which is what I was focused on. And it wouldn't settle on the breath, like not even for 2 seconds or 3 seconds. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, at the end of every whatever session I do, like a 2-minute, 3-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute, I'm going to open my diary, and I'm going to write about what I was thinking. And I did that twice a day. Every time I would practice, I would sit down and write my thoughts. And very soon I realized, maybe, 2 months down the line, I realized that my thoughts had a pattern. So,
Right.
in the sphere of, like, meditation and mindfulness, a lot of people talk about a monkey mind. A monkey mind meaning, like a monkey, your mind is jumping from one branch to the other on a tree. And obviously I had a monkey mind as well. But what I realized, and what I didn't know before that, is that my monkey mind was going to the same branches every single time. They could be categorized, I would say, right? So even though the thoughts were many, and by the way, I don't know, I read it at that time, I think you have up to like 60,000 or 70,000 thoughts per day. Can you imagine, like, that kind of chatter in your head, like, constantly going on? And I categorized my thoughts into, I would say, a couple of different categories. One, I had a to-do list running in my head all the time. As I said, as a mom, as a working parent, I just had something that was going on that I had to, like, mentally keep reminding myself. Like, today we have to do this thing. I have to take my kids here or there, or whatever that was. So that constantly was something that, like, a chatter that I would hear in my head. Two, I was complaining about my husband a lot. for silly things in my head, like, hey, this morning he didn't stack the coffee cups in the right place after he unloaded the dishwasher, or, this has happened again and again and again. And I realized how that pattern continued for, little things. Three, I realized, and I didn't believe this about myself, but three, I did realize that I had a big time FOMO, which is fear of missing out. So I would look at, and I wasn't on social media as much, but the times I would go on social media, I would be left with this feeling of like, oh my God, everyone else is doing all these amazing things and I'm not, whether it's like vacation or pool or beach or whatever that might be. And four, then quite sadly, so for myself, I did realize that I was also judging people all the time in my head and labeling them. My first encounter with a neighbor down the street, or the first time I met someone in a Zoom meeting, that there was this chatter in my head that automatically went into like, judgment. And slowly with time, when I became aware of these thoughts and brought that kind of practice of mindfulness into my day to day, I started to distinguish myself from these thoughts. Like I started to say to myself, well, that's just a thought. That doesn't mean that it's something that I believe in, and I can let it pass. And I started to see my life in what I would say, like these three circles. I actually have an object that I brought to my TEDx talk as well. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but it's like, do you see these three heart shapes?
The three hearts, yeah.
So imagine the center one is you, right? Like in your life, like that's how I started to see myself. This is just beautiful and shaped like a heart, but that could be just a circle too. Imagine this is you. Imagine this middle circle right here is everyone you love, like in your life. So that's your family, your friends, people you care about, the people you think about the most. And imagine the last circle is your community and people you don't know, generally speaking. And you could have many circles here, like in terms of like the world, the universe, and so on and so forth. But what I realized is that my mind and my thoughts would normally go to like, this circle and this circle a lot more than they would come here. Meaning I was paying too much attention and I was giving too much of energy to what other people were doing and what the community was doing and why they were doing that and judging that versus bringing my attention to the center circle. And if I truly poured my energy in the center circle, so imagine if you're pouring something in the center circle. If you would pour like a liquid, like water right here in the center, it would naturally overflow to the one outside, and that would naturally flow to the one, immediately outside. And that would be a more natural way of giving your energy, where once you have given all your attention to yourself is when you can naturally give your good attention and good energy to others and then to your community. Whereas I think what I was tending to do prior to that is sporadically and, at times trying to give attention here, here, and here, and it wasn't really working out, but because it wasn't natural. So the one thing that I was left with is I have to work on myself before I work on others. And working on myself doesn't mean like more in a self-improvement way. It doesn't mean that I'll go to a workshop for 20 days and improve myself. But every single moment of my life, like trying to decode my life with every breath that I take is how I call it. And the more I become aware of myself, the more I become aware of others and the more I can give to them and the community. So I think it all starts with self. So that's the entire idea that I try to share through my TED talk about living from the inside out.
That's actually very profound what you've just said there. And it's interesting that whilst you were doing your MBA that you were told to go on this course, right? It's did you learn all of this when you went on this meditation course, or is it something that kind of filtered through? Did you have to do some further learning, say this is how to use mindfulness in a way that makes you live or helps you live your life inside out?
Yeah. No, I did not learn anything at that time. I mean, as I said, I had very little value for meditation at that point in life. Like I can only now in hindsight connect the dots from there to here and say, well, it all started there because I know there was some root there that I must have really liked it, or something must have happened then for me to then start to get more interested in this with time. I did a lot more learning during those COVID days when I was home and, we obviously had a lot to do, but I had started to practice mindfulness or meditation, if you will, and wanted to see like what other types of meditation and mindfulness existed, that I could learn from. So I would go to the library and pick all these. Actually, it was my husband who brought a meditation book home. It's called Living Untethered from Michael Singer. It's an amazing book if you can get your hands on it. And like I would do with every book that he brings home from the library that interests me, I snatch it from him and try to read it before him. I tell him everything that I've just read, which is what I did with that book. We ended up buying the book, and I read a lot of books from John Kabat-Zinn, who's known as kind of, this father of like Western mindfulness. And then I did a course, just a certification course on mindfulness that required me to work with a group of other mindfulness practitioners as well. It was a virtual course. We did it over several weeks. I think it was over 3 months, and it ended with like a silent day of retreat as well. So I did try to learn a lot from the books, and then through this course as well. So no, I don't think a lot of these insights happened to me in one day or even in the one moment. And I wouldn't even say it happened during COVID. I think it's only with that practice that I would be sitting down and, I would have all these thoughts, and then I would have a aha moment of like, oh my God, why do I keep going back to conversations? Like I would just speak to you, let's say on a Zoom meeting, right? Like for 30 minutes. And I would be sitting in my practice and I'd be like, why did I say that to Sanjay? I shouldn't have said like this, or I should have, or like I would be pre-thinking of like the next conversation I would have with you, or like the next person I would meet. And it wasn't really needed. I was spending so much energy on these things that really had no value. And I haven't formally studied like how our brain works and how thoughts work, but the little that I've read, I do realize that a lot of our human brain is trying to prepare us for circumstances, right? Like, which is natural, right? Like, you see something like red flying by, yellow flying by, you're like, oh my God, like that must be a bee, right? Like those thoughts prepare you for certain circumstances and situations. And to an extent, they're all like valuable. But I think a lot of the chatter that goes on in our head is not of true value, and we attach too much of our energy to the thoughts, and separating is good. So I think it's a long answer to your question around whether this in a day or
no, it's a great answer. I was also as you were talking, I was kind of reflecting on my own kind of life as well, which I recently said to my wife that all my life I felt like I've been doing things for other people. And whether it was for my parents, whether it was for family, whether it's for my children, and now I'm going to start doing things for myself. And the reason for that is actually what you said, which was to fill that inner cup first, right? Because then you can flow it out to all those around you. If you're focusing your energies all elsewhere, then you're not necessarily refreshing yourself. And it's like when you're on an aeroplane, you put your oxygen mask on first, right? It's that kind of principle, isn't it?
Can I ask you a question then? What made you have that realization? Like, was it a moment in time, or is this something that you've also realized over time?
It was, it's actually a book I was reading called Sleight of Mouth by Robert Dilts. I only just started reading it a couple of weeks ago. And in that he's got a little model, which is like a pyramid. And at the top of that is purpose. And he talks about how your purpose redefines itself over time. And it made me sort of stop and say, well, my purpose so far had always been, if you ask me my values and my purpose, it would always be family was the number one thing. And it still is very much the kind of number one motivator. But the purpose now for me is actually me. And it's about looking after myself first so that then I can look after others, which hadn't really kind of like resonated until I read that. And it just made me think about reframing my own world and reframing what I'm doing. So that's how I came about it. It was only like a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that I had that moment, that aha moment.
That's so good.
And with your journaling as well, when I speak to quite a few people who journal, but I don't think anyone I've ever spoken to has stopped to review, if you like, that pattern of thoughts that they have that that then gave them that moment that they realized that, okay, I'm spending too much time on this. I'm doing too much of, self-criticism or labeling people or replaying conversations. So that's quite an important thing. And I'm not sure that many people do that when they journal. I think they journal and they might reflect on it at some point, but I also know a lot of people who just journal to clear their head, and that's it. They don't necessarily look at it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I've been journaling for a long time. I just like to write, like for myself, like sometimes, as you said, to clear my head. And, it's something that
Yeah.
in our days of like, training employees, like when I've done that in my previous roles where you're helping people think through an experience, we would always recommend people to be like, take a journal and write about what you're going through, especially if you're traveling to a new place or going through a certain challenging circumstance. So I naturally drew towards journaling when I couldn't figure out a way to meditate. I think for me, it was a simpler solution to then become really aware of my thoughts. Like I was trying to become aware of my thoughts. And in the process of doing so, I realized the only way I could do that is if I mentally took note of the thoughts, because I knew at the end of my 20-minute session, I'm going to write them down. So it made me extremely aware of what I was thinking. Otherwise, I was jumping from one branch to the other. Like my monkey mind was jumping in so many places that at the end of 20 minutes, if I would get up and you'd be like, Manu, like, how was the meditation session? I'd be like, like, I don't know. I don't know if I meditated or not because, yeah, it was really hard. So I think I started to do that with that intention. And I often didn't make complete notes. Like I often just said, like I would just say Sanjay, right? Like as a tag, like it would be a tag. Like I thought about Sanjay, or like I thought about, the coffee cups or whatever it is. Like I would make quick notes of like the things that I thought. And it's only with time that I realized that I could actually categorize them into. So I looked at Sanjay, I look at all these pages that I fill and I'm like, oh my God, it's these conversations that are filling my head. Like I'm always like, so I started to then like think about like, how do I categorize them? And very quickly, then my practice of note taking changed to, okay, I thought about a conversation. Okay, I had this moment of FOMO. Okay, I had this, like I was thinking of to-do list. That's always happens to me. Or okay, oh, again, I was judging this person that I actually barely know them, right? And it's with that awareness that the next time the thought would occur to me, I'd question it and be like, really, Mana? Really? Like, let go of this. And so so obviously there were two voices in my head. One that, was, this like what I would say is default that I don't even own. I mean, now I feel like, okay, it's just this random radio that's going on, this noise, and I don't want to attach myself to it. And the other that would encourage me to question and challenge and not attach myself to the thought.
How many times did coffee cups appear in your journal?
Many times. Well, now I joke with my husband because he knows I've talked about it, in my TEDx talk, and every time like he would unload the dishwasher, I'm like, oh, again, like the coffee cups, and he's like, well, that's what I'm gonna do. So it also makes.
Now they can be anywhere. I'm assuming they can be anywhere on the countertop or wherever. They don't have to be stacked in a particular way.
Oh, yeah. So I think it's good.
Talking about doing things for others, something you had said when we were preparing was around your kind of educational experience, and you became a lawyer, which took the color out of your life, which was, I thought, quite a powerful statement. Did you become a lawyer because that's what your parents were guiding you towards and family members were saying that's the right thing to do? How did you end up?
Yeah, I think it was a series of different things. I did not intentionally want to become a lawyer, right? I honestly actually didn't even know what I wanted to become. But back in the day, like a lot of people, that I was growing up with, either wanted to be an engineer and a doctor, right? Like I'm sure you can relate to that, growing up in India. And those were probably the only two choices that I had. Now, I wasn't taking my studies too seriously when I was in high school. So I did not qualify to become either. Engineering wouldn't have been my choice, but I tried for my pre-medical exams and did not get selected. And there was this one college that was in our hometown that was close to home, and we were just left with the choice to let's do this. my choice to do like a degree like that versus just a regular bachelor's was actually driven by my dad, because he was someone who had done a bachelor's degree, found a job, and he grew in his job over time. And we actually, with his job, we traveled a lot. In India, we lived in many different places. I went to 9 different schools as we were, in moving with him. But the one thing that he realized kind of as we were growing older is that if he had the choice to turn back time and do things differently, that he would not want to be in a job, like be at the service for others. Like he would have wanted to be an entrepreneur, if you will, right? So when he had that realization, I think he then shared that with us. So I'm one of 3 children, and he shared that with us and said, the one thing that I would ask you 3 to consider doing is do a degree that allows you to set up your own thing, whatever that is, right from the day you graduate, instead of going and doing a job for someone else. So my sister ended up being a doctor, my brother is an architect, and then I ended up being a lawyer when that happened. So I was like, okay, we'll just do this. So I did that. I graduated out of law school. I ended up doing fairly well on the academic side of things. So, I ended up kind of getting good grades and what have you. Actually, I topped my law college. And when I came out, everyone was like, "Oh, you're gonna become a judge!" Like, that's like the natural course. Like, and I was like, "I don't know if I want to become a judge, right?" The little that I knew about law practice, I had no one in my family that I could go to and see like what it means to be a lawyer. The little that I knew was from the TV shows that you would see or the movies that you would see, which was all very like, fascinating and interesting, and these like court dramas that you would see. Well, when I went to our our courts in this little town that I lived in, it was unlike any of what I had seen on TV. Like it was highly boring. I would have to dress in black and white as would all the other lawyers. And, I realized that there was not a lot of action, quote unquote, and a lot of things would move. Like I would move files from day 1 to day 2, but there wasn't any positive impact that was happening to anyone. In fact, I would end up coming home and feeling really sad about these cases that we would be talking about, which was just matter of fact, like a brother, like, suing his brother for like a property case, or like a divorce settlement, or there was just these like issues that for me caused a lot of emotional hassle. Like I just couldn't leave that behind. So I remember coming home one day and like walking after dinner, I would usually walk with my dad like right outside the house. And I was walking with him and I shared with him, I said, "Dad, this isn't something I'd want to do. Like, this is just taking away the color from my life, right? Like, I can't see myself living in black and white, like literally and otherwise. And I'd want to do something else." And that's when I made up my mind to do something else. And the something else, again, like back in the day, I don't think I would have another opportunity to like go to a job that would feel like relevant or appropriate for me. But I decided I would go do an MBA that might open more opportunities. So that's when I quit law, did my MBA. And right out of my MBA school, I actually ended up in, quite contrary to my law experience, I ended up in the fashion industry. And my first job was with this retail lifestyle apparel brand in India. And I was doing, helping with like India's largest fashion show and fashion week event. So I went from black and white to complete color. I transported myself in a different world. And again, in hindsight, I think after 2 or 3 years of doing the job, I was like, oh my God, this is so hollow. Like all of this, like the modeling industry and the fashion industry. I mean, again, on the show fit, on the face of it, it's like colorful and it's bright and it's, people look up to, but the inside of it felt really nothing, like felt like a big zero, right? So that led me to a quest of like, what kind of job can I find that I can still use my skills, that I have, or whatever I've gained through my education. And I ended up in the healthcare industry and, started doing marketing and healthcare. And that, I would say, to an extent, filled my cup. Like I felt good with it because I felt like I was doing something, good for the world. But even then I had this feeling of like I could do more, like there's probably something more. And as I was chasing that, it just so happened at that time my company had this scheme where they would let you go and work with a nonprofit partner full time while you were doing your job, while you were getting paid, and you would kind of apply the same skills you had, but in a nonprofit environment and help them with whatever they were trying to do. So I ended up working with a nonprofit full time for 3 months and help with fundraising and, together with the nonprofit, we organized one of India's first healthcare awards for people who give, are, do something philanthropic, like a philanthropic nature to healthcare. And with that, we raised a lot of money. So it was good for the nonprofit. It was good for the community. It was good for the people that were involved in the entire awards thing. And it ended up being really good for me because I came back from that experience and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Like I knew that I could apply the skills that I have, but in an environment where I could impact the community. So I think that led me to a role where I led like corporate volunteering efforts and social impact efforts for my company. And from there, the role that I'm in today, which is about sustainability. So,
Right. Okay, so it's quite a journey from lawyer, dressing in black and white, to fashion and passion shows, which are full of color, full of noise, but empty in the middle, to then finding something that really fills your cup, as you said, which was working with the nonprofit and the sustainability and diversity, inclusion, all of those elements, which is, it's quite a journey. What sort of time period was that over from, becoming a lawyer to, I suppose, finding what really resonates with you?
Let me see, 2014, 17-ish years.
Yeah, these things don't happen overnight, do they? It is something that slowly, suddenly is kind of how it happens, right? You're moving towards it, and then there's a point where actually you realize that's it, that's the thing. But because oftentimes we want immediate change or we want immediate success, but quite often it is that slow build, that slow build of experiences as well, and knowledge and sharing with others that is what leads to that sort of final.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all of this makes sense in hindsight. I mean, as I was doing all of these, it wasn't I wouldn't be able to tell you in this way, or articulate in this way why I left my lawyer journey and went to do an MBA. Had you asked me at that point in time in my life, of course, it's only in hindsight that I can see those moments shine and be like, oh, I remember that walk with my dad. I remember why I changed the course. But there would be a lot of people would be like, wait, why are you doing this? Why are you leaving this and doing that? Because you would have, a great career here, right? The typical definition of success, I know you talk about success and this is what your podcast is all about, is about, it's almost seen as this vertical ladder, no matter where you are in your path, right?
Yeah.
You are an associate and, you're a lawyer, then you're a senior lawyer, so on and so forth, right? Or you can apply that in the corporate job for sure, right? But it is not what it has been for me. I feel like I've jumped ladders, I've even just down from the ladder and said, I want to do this anymore. But it's a trap. I mean, honestly, sometimes, I feel like it's just a huge cultural trap for me. I'm sure it is for people, where once you're there, you're just expected to do the next thing, right? And if you don't do it, then people around you and your own brain will ask you wait, what's going on? Why aren't you wanting to do this next thing, right? Why don't you want that next promotion? Are you lazy? Are you not performing? Don't you want to stretch? Are you not ambitious, right? And I don't know if it plagues your mind as much, but it does plague my mind a lot. And I think a lot of that is owing to just me being a woman, me having duties as a mother, not to say that their father doesn't have the same duties, but just it takes you down a different path where like, oh, I see, like you want to prioritize your family. Okay, that makes sense. Right. Like, but I don't think that's how it works. Like, I think it's just counterintuitive to success. It's counterintuitive to how it is normally seen culturally, right? So for me, I think,
Yeah. So how would you define success then now, having been on this journey? And, as I kind of said at the beginning, success means different things to different people. And for me, having been in a sales role, success was always about the number. And that was really the kind of thing that you measured your success against. But as part of this podcast episode or podcast series, it's really success means so many different things to different people. And the world is full of successful people who aren't measured by a number or by an outcome. So how would you define success now?
So how would I define success? I think for me, I would say two things. One, in my mind, I've been able to flip the question to say it's not success that I'm aiming for. It's my legacy that I would want to think about, right? So when you're gone, and this is a finite end for everyone in this world, right? Like this is one thing that universally applies to you, me, everyone else. Everyone is going to die one day, right? Like I'm not saying that in a pessimistic way. I'm saying that in a realistic, practical way, right?
It's a matter of fact, right? It's a matter of fact. We're going to go
right. And I think I've had the courage to go there only with my mindfulness practice. And there've been like situations in my life, especially in the last few years, where I felt like I've had to think a lot about death because I've seen that in my family. And when you see that, you realize that success isn't about, no one will think of you as that person who was a millionaire or who used to drive a Porsche or like who had this big house. People think of you as someone who had a good heart or someone who had a good soul or someone who was a great dad or a great mom or, just someone who helped the community, right? So those are the characteristics on which your legacy is built. And that's how I would think of success. Like, what is the legacy that I want to leave behind? What is the things that I want to be remembered for, in an easier way? So I want to be remembered as a good mom, right? Like I want my children to be saying that, not anyone else, like my children to be saying that, oh, like our mom was really good. I have this joke with my son where he's like, Mom, you're the best mom I know in this world. Or like, you're the best mom I've had in this life. I'm like, yep, you've only had one. So that, and things that you were saying, I mean, you probably want to be remembered as someone who did good to the community in whatever way, shape, and form that you did. Like, someone who left the world in a better place than before, someone who had some kind of valuable impact. So that is one. I would say the legacy is one. The second thing I would say is that it's always a work in progress, right? So meaning that my legacy of today might be different, like today than it would be tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow I'm a grandmother and I want that to be my legacy. You know what I mean? So I think with age and time and maturity and the experiences you gain in life, and the things you do in life, your legacy changes and evolves. And I think for me, that definition of success also then evolves, right? Because I don't know the experiences that will come to me the next, few months, few years. And maybe that would change the legacy I want to leave. But the values will probably stay the same. So that's what I would say. The one thing that maybe for anyone who's watching or listening to this podcast, I would leave behind, the one exercise that has truly helped me, and I did this, several years ago, but I keep going back to, I did this as part of a training course, and they had us think, the question they asked us is, think of two people in your life that you look up to. And they say two people. One could be a family member, right? Just someone you really know personally well, right? Someone you can look up to. And one could be anyone else. Like it could be a celebrity, it could be someone you just know or have read of. And as you think of these two people and have those two images in your head, think about what about them do you appreciate, admire, like, and why you look up to them. And then try and see like which of their values resonate with you. You'll probably find, as I did for me, is that a lot of what I saw in the two people that I thought of resonated with my personal values, which is why I looked up to them. So it gave me a clear way to measure my success or legacy, because I could resonate that in my life. And they were both older individuals, like people that, I looked up to. So it was easy for me to then draw the line to, okay, I see why I want to be like this person, or I see why I admire this person, because these are the values that I can implement.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming that as part of that kind of measure, it wasn't what we typically think of in terms of, as you say, driving the Porsche or having millions in the bank or anything of that nature. That was not the criteria upon which you chose those people, right?
I mean, at least not for me. I'm sure it could be different for different people, right? Like, I mean, and I think that's the other thing about success. It's like different for different people. Like how you measure success and how I measure success be very different things. So, and that's totally fine because we're all unique, right? So, but for me, it was my dad in my family, in my personal realm, and the reason I look up to him is for many reasons. One, he's a great dad to me, someone I could always like talk to and confide in, and someone I've had like a lot of conversations with, as I was saying to you, like my move from like being a lawyer to then jumping into MBA. He's also someone who's very optimistic, laughs a lot, and spreads joy, I feel like, for his family and for everyone else. And then the other person I thought of was this individual that I worked with when I was in this nonprofit, who was a great like oncologist, like a renowned oncologist in India, and left his medical practice to then work with the nonprofit because he thought he could make a bigger impact there than serving individual patients. And he continued to advise individual patients, but in the nonprofit, he felt like he would have more of that ripple impact where he could do more things for others. And he did that, I think, as he turned 50, like on his birthday, or like something about a milestone, like where I just felt like, for someone who had been so successful in his career to completely flip that, right? Like, and change that narrative to say, this has been great, but I want to do something completely different was something I looked up to.
Normally I ask a previous guest to ask a question for my next guest, but actually within this conversation, we have covered that question because her question was, how do you think we can redefine what success means more broadly? And I think we've kind of covered that question. Do you have a question for my next guest?
Yeah, I would ask, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
What legacy do you want to leave behind? And interestingly, that was a conversation I had with someone just the other day where she's just a bit of a coaching conversation that I was having, and the perspective that I was giving was, okay, you're now at a certain point in your life and you're looking forwards, but what actually are you looking to achieve as part of that? And if we look backwards, as it were, you've got to a point and you look backwards as the legacy, then what would that look like to help her kind of get her thoughts together as to what she wanted to do moving forward, rather than necessarily what she felt she needed to do moving forward, if that makes sense. I think that goes back to what you were saying, that cultural thing that, you're on a particular path, so therefore that's the path you should be on, because you feel you've got to do that because everyone is telling you you've got to do that, rather than necessarily what really you want to do, right? And what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah. And in some ways, probably you and your podcast also represents that, right, Sanjay? Like with, like you've also like changed that, like with this podcast, you're trying to get people, this platform to help them and help the world see how you can change the world. So I'd love to hear what legacy you want to leave behind as well.
But this is part of the legacy, actually. This is part of it that, in some ways, right, this could out-survive me, right, in terms of it's on a medium, it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on all the channels. And if one person picks it up at some point in the future and says, oh, this conversation that I've had with you, Manu, that was really profound for me, then that's been the legacy, right? That's made an impact on their life. And I have noticed in my own coaching conversations that you can make an impact on someone's life, and the ripple effect for them with their family, with their friends, with others is actually pretty vast. So that one person changing something in their life can actually affect a whole multitude of people. Very similar to your 3 hearts kind of thing, right? It's the effect that goes around.
Absolutely.
We're kind of at the top of our time now, actually. So it's been a great conversation, and I really like the way you positioned what mindfulness has done for you and the way which journaling has helped you get clarity of your all those monkey thoughts that were jumping around, and the regularity of certain thoughts that made you pause and say, actually, yeah, why am I thinking that? I don't need to think that way. And like I said, I've not heard someone explain to me that way of using the journaling or even the mindfulness. So thank you very much for sharing your story.
Of course. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Love chatting with you. And one day we can reverse podcast. Like I'll ask you questions.
Absolutely. If you'd like to find out more about how you can find your success, contact me at info@successmatterscoaching.com. That's info@successmatterscoaching.com.